How we doing, everybody? Welcome to a dark, cold, and rainy day. Let me see if I can be helpful here with our questions. Slide this over in this direction a little bit. Let's get rid of that. So our first article, probably the goofiest one that you've had this week. Scout and McAlexander riding Harley Davidsons. Here we go. Does it take a decade to create this subculture, or in today's environment, can it be created in a shorter span? I don't think it takes decades to create a subculture, even back then and even now. And I believe we have, in today's environment, the ability to go viral significantly quicker. At the same time, some of these things this subculture could shrivel up quicker than in the past. But if you think about all the things that are needed to sustain a subculture, consciousness of kind, being able to collate in a common place, being able to get a set of ethos and a worldview, this can all be done through social media rather quickly. Think of how fast Occupy Wall Street started. That happened relatively fast. What are other brands that have created such close-knit subculture such as Harley Davidson? Well, the big ones are Nike, Apple, Harley Davidson, VW, but really there's an awful lot. I mean, think about fashion. Think about, I know this is older, but the Harikuchu area of Tokyo, which Gwen Stefani talks about in her lyrics all the time. It's also a function of, if we look at this, we talk about boats, we could talk about Boston Whaler. You have to think about, if we talk about sports, we definitely have sports brands. Running shoes, particularly New Balance has a very, very strong running culture. Those crazy shoes with the fingered toes. What you have to think about is try to find a product class, cars, motorcycles, and see if there is a brand that has extremely strong fan devotion. I mean, for all intents and purposes, all these products could be utilitarian. But if they cross the chasm from utilitarian to something more than utilitarian, and you're more of a fan of a brand, guess what? Michael Kors right now is in a major fandom mode. Is there a particular age group that exhibits subcultures like these more than other age groups? We can say, in general, this tends to skewer young. Because if this is the subculture, you got to have time to participate in the subculture. So guess what? I mean, we see a lot of the Harley Davidson, and a lot of Harley Davidson actually is an somewhat older subculture, because these are the people that have the disposable income and the time to be doing all these crazy Harley Davidson riding. Kids might be empty nesters. That was brought up in the article. But usually it tends to be a younger demographic. What is the company's marketing strength that allows it to maintain this phenomena and this subculture? If you were to ask me this question, which you are, I would say that the company has to embrace the subculture and understand that they can't necessarily control the subculture. Meaning, it's the fans and the crowd. Excuse me. It's the fans and the crowd that maintain and propagate the subculture. Not the company. Not the brand. The brand is a participant, not the leader. The more the company tries to become the leader and dictate what the subculture should do, the more the subculture is going to shrivel and disappear. Because that's not what sustains a subculture. We're going to talk more about bottom-up marketing throughout the readings this semester. But really, subcultures of consumptions is a bottom-up movement, not a top-down. What does triangulation of data mean? Well, this article, and we've heard this in previous articles, this is a qualitative data analysis. One of the strengths of qualitative data is this deep, thick description. One of the downsides to qualitative data is it's not generalizable. It's harder. Just because one person says something, that does not mean it applies to all Harley-Davidson riders. So what the authors wanted to do is they wanted to do more than just interview people riding. They did extensive participation. They went to meetings. They went to rallies. They collected data. They did interview. They collected this thick description data from multiple viewpoints. So in other words, this phenomenon of the subculture of consumption, they came at through a variety of different means. Triangulation is really a GPS military thing, meaning you need 3 points of data to figure out location. At what point in a product's history does it develop a mystique? Can marketers get in the way of the mystique ever happening by not letting it run its course in a subculture? Well, the second half of this question I already answered. You bet marketers can ruin a subculture. No ifs, ands, or buts. At what point does a product history develop a mystique? Well, sometimes it takes a very long time. Sometimes it happens instantaneously and a product is born that way. I mean, there are guitar companies that because it's a particular builder that used to work at another company, he starts the new company, and just because of the individual and his history, it has that mystique from day one. This happens within fashion, this happens within marketing, this happens within ad agencies. But the important thing is that it's got to come, the crowd determines the mystique. The story says it's ironic that many Harley-Davidson owners customize their bikes with non-Harley parts. Why doesn't Harley monitor this behavior and start manufacturing their bikes based on what consumers are showing up through these customizations? Doesn't the story also say that consumers help with product advertisements at Harley? Well, let's go here. Harley does monitor this behavior extensively, and they do start creating bikes based on how people are changing their customizations. Choppers, for instance. Being able to have your handlebars up real high, for instance. Soft tails, which is like where the seat kind of goes and slopes down very gradually. These are customizations that people are doing, and then Harley will create future models based on these customizations. Harley actually wants people to customize their bikes so they can see what's going on. The last thing that Harley wants to do is, reduce what people, restrict in any way this user-generated innovation, because they want to see what the users are doing so then they can, through monitoring their behavior, make these customizations more in their standardized models. In certain ways, you could see that the Harley-Davidson marketing people can go to Daytona, take millions of photos, and then see, okay, these are the iconic people, and then they could recreate that photo in an ad. This is exactly how these people look. Can you explain a cottage industry in greater detail? I think a cottage industry is something that is very specific. Usually when people use this term, it's not a mainstream industry. Cell phones is not, the smartphone market is not a cottage industry. It's not the mainstream. Automobiles are not the mainstream. Cottage industries would be something like crafting, Harley Davidson is not a cottage industry, but what would be a cottage industry is all the apparel for the motorcycles. And there's all these small little sub-segments that are related to the motorcycle that I'm sure the authors called these little things cottage industries. Small companies that go up around the main product or the main brand. I mean, it's way too big to call it a cottage industry, but you could say this is a smartphone, and the cottage industries around the smartphone would be the app developers, the people that make the cases, the people that make the headphones, and whatever else doodads you can get as an accessory for these things. Bluetooth keyboards, Bluetooth earpieces. That's what they mean by cottage industries. Can you comment on any other sub-consumption oriented besides those listed in the article? Again, this is something that was asked earlier. They're much more common than you can think of. I mean, in New York City right now is Comic-Con. I mean, massive, phenomenon. It's not just the comic books. It's the movies around the comic books. What implications do these findings have for more mainstream products and services? Well, to me, when I talked about this in the articles, when you cross into fandom and experience is creating this unbelievable brand loyalty, the reason why we have this brand loyalty is because the brand is part of their identity. Experience is the gateway drug to identity. It's who you are. If this brand becomes part of who you are, then talking about satisfaction or talking about loyalty, we're way beyond traditional loyalty measurements that we talked about in the early articles. This is the equivalent of what's a good example? I mean, I used to live in Florida. And Florida basically has, it's University of Miami, Florida, and Florida State. And to the point where it's really weird when someone from Florida State and someone from Florida marry each other. That's a really big deal. There's some things that have to be worked out in discussions. So it's not just satisfaction and loyalty. It's well beyond that. Were the authors of the Harley users before the research began? I've actually heard. I've met Scouten a number of times. I've never met Alexander. I believe he was a motorcycle rider before the article, and now is a diehard Harley guy. But both of them rode Harleys during this entire episode. Oh, you know what? Another one here. Scouten and McAlexander did another article on Jeep. And Jeep jamborees and, four-wheel drive, off-roading. Does this have any impact on the outcome of the study? Well, with qualitative data, one of the weaknesses of qualitative data is the interviewer has to become part of the research environment. It's the only way to get that depth, that deep, just the way we saw in the Susan Fournier article. She has to go into the homes of some of these people to interview them. And in and of itself, you become a little bit of an artifact of the data. Now, every research method has strengths and weaknesses. I love qualitative data, but I know that qualitative data in and of itself can't be the only thing. The best research is qualitative and quantitative. Sometimes that takes a very long time, and sometimes you do them in cycles. You start with qualitative to explore, and then you go to quantitative to confirm a finding through a national probabilistic survey. The author mentions briefly that a U.S. subculture crossing international borders. How does this work? Due to different regulations or society rules, would the entire subculture have to be reconfigured to adjust to a resulting in simply a different subculture than the one that it is known? Well, BMW is a subculture. Okay? And the BMW behaviors of Germany and the BMW behaviors of the United States might be different. However, they're more similar than not. Think about the Dave Matthews Band. Here's a guy who's a complete subculture where people go and follow and tour, and he's basically, or not even Dave Matthews, Phish. Phish is like the next second coming of the Grateful Dead. Okay, although it's predominantly a U.S. subculture, Phish is pretty popular in other parts of the world, Australia, Europe, and they tour. And guess what? The ethos and the worldview of Phish travels. Sometimes there is difference in society rules and there's some tweaks in cultures, but there's more similarity than not because the subculture carries its own it's like a unique little universe. And if the subculture and the consciousness of kind is imbued through a blog or a website or the band's fan page, well, it doesn't make any difference whether you're reading it from Germany or reading it from Tokyo or you're reading it from Vermont. It's the same worldview. As in the other article with Mountain Dew, it had to keep reforming its image to fit new ideologies in the marketing society. It does not appear that Harley-Davidson has done this. It has always remained true to the outlaw and the brotherhood subculture. Why hasn't it had to modify its image to adapt? Well, the short answer to this is the image that Harley-Davidson uses hasn't disappeared. I mean, there was a time period where Harley stopped going to that well. Harley had when they were owned by AMF, late 70s, early 80s, through the 80s into the early 90s. Actually, I talked about that in the article a little bit. They actually lost their way, and they stopped going to that cultural ethos. And it wasn't until they went back to it where they really found their fan base. Now, there are certain societal trends that'll come and go. I'm pretty sure that the redneck Dixie Southern culture thing hasn't come back, and Mountain Dew can't go back to it. Doug wanted to make the point that you have to find what that is and adapt your brand for that particular culture. I mean, even look at Mountain Dew right now. I think Mountain Dew is a little lost at the moment because they had the slacker culture and the X Games. I don't think they really deviated from that much since the 90s, yet the X Games extreme stuff, that's not as popular as it was when we saw all those Do the Do ads. You have to modify and adapt. Harley-Davidson is fortunate that they're one of the brands that the brand and the subculture are so, who has more tattoos on their body other than Harley-Davidson people? I think they're very fortunate. The author mentions that there's a high level of consumer-initiated innovation in the brand. Is there any incentive for the consumers? Well, there's no direct extrinsic incentive, meaning pay. They certainly don't get compensated. Maybe there's some free swag. There's a t-shirt or there's some free stuff or, Acknowledgement is a very big deal. But really, when it comes down to it, if Harley-Davidson is your identity and you do something that Harley-Davidson, the company, likes, you tend to feel proud about that because it sort of reinforces or re-emphasizes that you were right. And that your identity is, guess what? Something that's part of the larger group. It's called a recognition of economy. I'm surprised Pine and Gilmore don't have an article on this yet. But Seth Godin does have a book on this, Permission Marketing. So there's no monetary incentive, but there's more of an identity incentive. Is brand loyalty simply the reason why consumers feel compelled to do so many opinions about the brand? Now, it's more than brand loyalty. it's identity. It's who they are. They have no choice. It's like them talking about their kids. No, it's not that extreme, but it's a lot closer to them talking about their kids than them talking about their running sneakers that they bought at Sports Authority this weekend. How does Harley-Davidson gather the information obtained from consumer-initiated innovations to market on the brand? Harley-Davidson goes to all these massive subcultures of consumption rallies. They go to Daytona in Florida. They go to Sturgis in South Dakota. They go to Lanconin, or whatever that is, in New Hampshire. They go. And they'll take 50 or 60 people from Harley-Davidson Corporation. They'll have, like, a monster tent, and they'll have, like, tech gearhead people there, so people can come up and ask particular tech, specific questions, and maybe get a tune-up, and da-da-da-da. But there's a lot of sociologists, consumer behavior people, anthropologists, and they are there to document what they see, both through interviews, through photographs, through video. Some they do it directly, interviews. Some they do it unobtrusively, observation. Very good. Article 2. Welcome to the Experience Economy. This is Pine and Gilmore. Do you feel that charging admission to many of the experience mentioned in the article would drive a lot of consumers away? Well, it certainly sets the bar higher. And more than anything else, it sets the bar higher for expectations. I'm telling you right now, I see the price of the Walt Disney World tickets, and, when I lived in Tampa, we went a lot because relatives would come down and visit, and you would see the price. The last time I went, they were $92 or $95. And, a family of four, $400 to just walk through the front gate. You start looking at that, you're like, oh my God. And the scariest thing is that within 10 or 15 minutes, you totally forgot how much it cost for you to walk through that gate, because the experience is that good. Now, there are a lot of companies that don't want to charge admission. They want you to have the experience because they want to lower that barrier entry for you to get that initial experience. And a lot of event marketing runs this way. Test drives, those kind of things. In order to provide richer experiences, costs will likely increase. Maybe, maybe not. How can the little guy compete? Social. You're watching this right now through a YouTube video. Now, I bought a $99 program to do this, and I bought a $70 microphone to do this. But this is still little guy money. You could easily create a YouTube channel and create a fan following and become the next Justin Bieber. Right? Justin Bieber did not go out he didn't go to Nashville, he didn't go to Los Angeles, he didn't go to New York to get a record deal. He did it on YouTube. You have the ability to create rich experiences. You could do it on a blog. One of the Apple blogs that I follow immensely, this guy makes $500,000 a year, and he has a blog. That's it. It's a very, very rich experience. Is it fair to say that the full-fledged experience economy will be characterized by admission fees, as the author suggests? As per the previous question, no, I do not. In today's marketplace, free is everywhere. The author may have missed this one. Agree. As a matter of fact, if we go to a simple little Amazon search here, do I want to leave this page? Yeah, I want to leave this page. It's fine. Free in the title is it's not this guy, it is the long tail. So Chris Anderson, we're going to read a long tail article later this semester, but this book right here Basically, free gives you the ability to build audience. And once you have the audience, you monetize in different ways. That's the whole idea of free. Used to be the case where you would charge a small fee for everything up front. Now it's better to have everything free and you make money. I mean, this is Android. Think about it. Google gives Android away for free. They're giving it away for free because they want people to do more search. They make all the, you couldn't do search on smartphones. As soon as they saw, way back when, this was 2006 or so, when they bought Android. It was a Massachusetts, Boston, Cambridge-based company. At the time, there was like 950 million desktop computers in the world. Yet there was 2.7 billion cell phones. And Google's like, wait a minute, that's 3 times the number of computers out there. If you could do search on your cell phone, we'd make a whole lot more money. That's why Android is free. Microsoft and their model, which is getting blown up at the moment, they charged you a software fee for every program. Google gives everything away for free. Gmail's free. Why? Because they monetize you on ads. If a place like Brookstone were to charge an admission fee for people to come and try out their gadgets and massage chairs, would people still pay for the experience for stepping into a store and try out its products? Well, Brookstone's cool, and if I'm in the mall, I don't mind playing around in a Brookstone store. But they're not that amazing. They'd have to be Disney amazing. They would have to be Ferrari or Porsche amazing in order for them to charge for the experience. The better strategy would be to make them free and monetize on the actual purchase of something. You want to decrease the cost for trial. Isn't Brookstone just doing its job, marketing its customer by loud? Yeah, that's exactly right. If Brookstone were to become more of a theme park, well, yeah. But Brookstone's not a theme park. It's a retailer. You monetize by selling. You get people to try. Are there any other industries or retailers that, despite multiple attempts, do not seem to serve their customers the experience? Supermarkets usually have really lousy experiences. They really do. Wegmans doesn't. Trader Joe's doesn't. But most supermarket chains, yeah, really dry. IKEA is an experience. Anybody go to North Carolina to shop for furniture? That's an experience. Retailing's not one of my areas I know a ton about, but if you want guests to come back because they had a memorable experience, why would you keep changing it? Well, even Disney, who is probably number one in this category. If we talk about Harley being the identity subculture of consumption, Harley and Apple are probably the 2 best exemplars. Well, Disney is probably the best exemplar, bar none, here. Okay? Well, even for the diehards, you want the experience to be different each time for them to come back and keep paying $100 to come in. If they had an incredible experience in Visit 1, and Visit 2 they want to relive it, and Visit 3 they want to relive it, but nothing's changed between 2, 3 versus 1, and then they go to a 4th, if they even get to a 4th, and it's still the same, you have to tweak. And if you look at Disney World, they tweak on a yearly basis. They really do. They add hotels, they add attractions, they add things because you need to keep updating the experience so people will come back and they can charge for it. When creating indelible experiences, is it compelling for a customer? How do you keep the experience fresh on subsequent? You tweak the experience. The old adage is under promise and over deliver. Well, they already know, they have some baseline of what it's like to walk through a Disney park. But somehow or another, you know that there's a parade. Well, all of a sudden, the parade is now like the last time. I remember going to Disney parades, and it was a parade. And it was just really neat to see that many people in that kind of an order to do their thing. Now the parades at a Disney park are part Cirque du Soleil. And there's a parade, but there's guys on these stilts that are sort of like pogo sticks / stilts. And they're not just doing anything. They're doing backflips 25 feet in the air. There's trampolines. They up the ante. Do you believe this experience economy outlined in 1998 is still strong? It's stronger. It's stronger. How does an economic downturn drive consumers back to more utilitarian? Doesn't an economic downturn drive people back to more utilitarian consumption? An economic downturn not only drives you to utilitarian consumption, it often drives you back to nostalgic consumption. You want to go back to when, because it's, think about 2008, 2009, 2010, when everything sucked, economy sucked. You want to think about the good times when things were really good. And there was a lot of nostalgic and retro branding happening during that time. People wanted to go back. They wanted to go back to a happier time, happier consumption. It's stronger now because for the same reasons why we have an experience economy that bubbled up here, competition was so strong and, even loyalty wasn't enough. You needed to up the ante to get more towards identity, and you do that through experience. What's the difference between brand experience and consumer experience? I don't know if he was making necessarily a distinction there in the article. But consumers have experiences with brands. So the customer has to have the experience. They have to have the experience with something. It's a service, it's a brand, it's a retailer, it's something. Would potential customers really pay for an admission fee to go into a retail store? I answered this article earlier. I think the author was really just trying to make a point here. Could you make a retail store so amazing that it's the equivalent of going to a theme park? If you've ever been to a Bass & Company store or a Cabela's superstore where there is actually, you can go fishing in the store. There's a trout stream and it's stocked. You can go shooting guns, hunting in the store. There's a shooting range in the store. Could you charge for some of these? We're getting awful close to being able to do it. But the reality is they want more people to come into the store because every time someone comes into the store, you buy something. That's the better monetization route. Are there any stores that currently charge for entrance? I really can't think of one off the top of my head. Why doesn't Walt Disney yield more revenue from its retail stores? Isn't the store a branch of the Disney experience that it provides? The author states that Disney should yield as much revenue but doesn't. Why not? What's the problem? Well, when you're in a Disney theme park and you're immersed in the brand, okay, it's harder to stay away from that $25 plush toy, that stuffed animal, because you just saw the parade where a 25-foot version of that stuffed animal just walked by you. And all of a sudden, you need that Winnie the Pooh. It's a stronger connection within the theme park to purchase Walt Disney products than it is just having a Walt Disney store in a mall. Now, Disney also had a lot of other issues with their retail stores. They had someone running their retail stores. It was actually an external company. It wasn't a Walt Disney company. The product quality was shoddy. It really was not an awesome experience. And if they revamped all their stores, they closed about a third of them because there was too many stores. It wasn't special. Everywhere you went, there was a Disney store, so it wasn't special. It was oversaturated. They made the store more of an experience. You know, there's dress up in the store. There's movies being played in the store. There's role playing that's happening in the store. When does the benefit not outweigh the cost of providing such an engaging experience? To charge customers to sell to them, the experience that the company provides must be costly to the firm's bottom line. Well, obviously, if you a product costs X, there's only so much margin in it. If you do too much marketing, which marketing includes an engaging experience, that's more than your margin for the cost of that, well, guess what? This is a pencil. You know, you get a pack of 10 of these for $1.99. Okay? How much experiential stuff can you do with this? You know, not much. But we know that this is a Sharpie, and Sharpie has an incredibly viral campaign happening, you know, basically showing all the different things you can do with a Sharpie. And mostly it's artists and, you know, them creating art, and they have like a whole Tumblr thing. It's either Tumblr or Twitter, one of the other. So your engaging experience has to be something that doesn't cost as much. So it doesn't outweigh the costs. I mean, Disney has ridiculous margins. Guess what? They can go over the top with experience because, you know, they have the margins to support these marketing expenditures. If experiences have to meet a customer need, doesn't the firm need to truly differentiate between the product need that is fulfilled and a separate experiential need? Are these two totally different things? It's like selling two products. Well, the more you drift between selling two products, the more you have a disconnect. You want the experience to fit the brand or the product. I mean, Apple wants you to create. They want you to create an iMovie. They want you to create something in GarageBand. They want you to create something with iPhoto and create a book. Well, what the product does and how you create these products or experiences are the same thing. You know, for companies that, let's say Microsoft. Let's say, and they don't do this, by the way. Let's say they were to go out and hire Jay-Z and Justin Timberlake to do a concert, and they were to stream it through Microsoft's website. And we know that Jay-Z and Justin are two very talented individuals. It would be an awesome experience for fans of Jay-Z and Justin, but there's a disconnect between Jay-Z and Justin and Microsoft, you know. It is two different things. Don't spend your money that way. You know, the experience has to fit with the brand. If it doesn't fit with the brand, then you don't get the pop. You don't get the experience and the brand connection. The Harley experience and the product experience is the same thing. Most memorabilia are often deemed too expensive. What is the association between the value of experience and the price point? Haven't firms figured out that pricing should be less or the experience more? Well, the adage is you get what you pay for. Higher the quality, higher the price. You know, I'm pretty sure a regular coach ticket from Philadelphia or New York to LA, you could probably get one for $300 to $400. You can get a first class ticket for probably $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000. But if you want to go into outer space, it's $200,000. So in that case, the experience, guess what? If you want to not go into outer space, but feel what it's like to be weightless, you can spend $5,000 and go down to either Cape Canaveral or Fort Lauderdale and ride. There's a number of these airplane rides out there that's like a 747 with no seats. 737 or a Boeing A320. that are just all padded inside, and they do these parabolas, and guess what? You get to feel what it's like. It's like 15 seconds of weightlessness. It's how they filmed the movie Apollo 11. The plane would film when they were doing this. It's how astronauts train. So, yeah. It's a very expensive experience. $5,000. What becomes an icon most? This is my favorite article of this week. Can you explain drawing on political authority to rebuild the myth? All right. Let me go back to this one, just so I'm perfectly clear here. This is in the back of the article. How to build an icon. Draw on political authority. Unlike conventional brands, icons don't behave as if they have a certain DNA, a certain truth that must be maintained. Icons must be reincarnated when ideology raptures because the value of their myth is erased. What remains intact is an artifact of the original brand, however, and it is political authority. When an icon's myth loses value, its constituency still looks to the brand to shed light on the kinds of contradictions that it has addressed in the past. Because the brand has yet been a trustworthy and committed advocate, consumers believe that it will speak for them again. You know, it doesn't talk about it here in this article, but I would like to think that Elvis, don't think of this as political authority as in politics. Think of it as an authority on something that has resonance within a culture. You know, it resonates. Like Elvis. Elvis has been dead since 1976, 1977. You know, or better, more recent, Michael Jackson. You know, Michael Jackson has this authority. The brand has this authority. And people from time to time are going to go back and reflect back on exactly what this is. When they says myth, throughout this article, one of the confusing parts of this article is myth really means story. I mean, what's the story? So Elvis's story is consistent. Michael Jackson's story is consistent. Sometimes it resonates stronger, and sometimes it doesn't resonate as strong. Now, we have brands, say Madonna, who likes to reinvent herself every 2 to 5 years or whatever. It used to be even quicker than that. To help maintain her story. She would change with the times. I wrote a blog post a year ago about Lady Gaga that her myth was drying up. And if you notice, Lady Gaga's got a brand new album out right now, and Katy Perry's got a brand new album out right now. But if you want to talk about the story that's most popular right now, it's Miley Cyrus. It's not Gaga, and it's not Perry. So, technically speaking, someone who's significantly more lightweight has a stronger brand story because the other two stories haven't changed. Does viral marketing go hand in hand with creating myths? Yes and no. Viral marketing can help create the myth, but you still need a strong story that can go viral. You know, without the story, without something that's really interesting and unique that will resonate within the broader culture out there, it doesn't make any difference whether you use viral techniques or not. It starts with the story. Are any of these mentioned ideological shifts upcoming? It's hard to see an industry giant like Nike faltering anytime soon. Well, I think Nike is a very market-oriented firm. And market-oriented firms are the ones that are constantly gauging consumer behavior and competitive behavior. They have this external orientation to try to identify the shifts. Nike is a perfect example because, you know, right now in the last 6 months, wearable computer technology has been the rage. Okay? Samsung has their Gear Watch out. Some of you have a Fitbit. Some of you have Jawbone. Some of you have other wearable internet devices. Okay? Nike had the wearable internet devices years ago. Even though you're thinking that the Fuel Band is the most cutting edge at the moment, they've had apps and the thing that goes inside your shoes. I was living in Boston. This was 06, 07, 08. Nike actually started this ideological shift towards wearable devices. It's a company like Microsoft who keeps missing them that are in trouble. It's a company like Research in Motion that makes the BlackBerry that missed all the trends that's in trouble. Nike tends to be out on the forefront more than most others, and they see a shift coming and then they usurp it. Fuel Band. Are there any brands right now that are undergoing a transition from brand to icon? Oh, brand to icon. Well, perfect. I love cars. Tesla. Tesla is, we were, last weekend here in my town, there was a environmental event. It was sponsored by the township and parks and recreation and fishing and wild animals. Tesla was there. And Tesla, the corporation, wasn't there. Tesla, the fan club in the greater Delaware Valley, which only has 27 people, by the way, were there. 2 cars. Wanted to emphasize the environmental aspect of having an electric car. I think that's a very good example. The license plate was a New Jersey license plate, and instead of kick ass, it was kick gas was the license plate. Very cool. Isn't following icons a way of conforming rather than being rebellious? All right. This is not a chicken and the egg conversation, but basically what happens is you get a small group to create the subculture or to create the rebelliousness, and then you get a lot of people to follow in their wake. And a lot of people think that they're in on something, but really they're following a trend. And what happens is when the trend gets too big, then guess what? It stops becoming popular. There are some icons that when they get that big, they then morph to go to the next, and they get a small group of culture. I mean, here's a perfect example. 4 or 5 years ago, everybody wore those Von Dutch hats. Remember them? Looks like a farming kind of trucker hat. They were charging $20 or $30 for a hat that probably cost like $1 to make. That started off as a little trend. It got real big. Once everybody was wearing them, it stopped. But then Von Dutch didn't do anything else. They didn't have a second act. Where if you think of other companies, they have a second act. You think of other celebrities, they morph. Even Apple, okay? Apple has this history. We're in the Apple stage right now from the second coming of Steve Jobs from 1997 on. And so far, they keep pushing the outer limit. First, they just had computers. And then they did the iPod thing. Then they did the iPhone thing. Then they did the iPad thing. Now, people are complaining that Apple hasn't done anything behind iPad recently. And we're going to see if in the next couple weeks that there might be something different, like Apple's wearable device. It's just going to be called an iPod. You'll see. Isn't this... Oh. How much of a brand can evolve before it's losing its customer base? I don't know. A brand certainly can extend itself too far, lose its identity, and lose all its customers. Not that you guys can remember Michelob, but Michelob used to have a very strong premium brand following. And then way back in the day, they made Mick Dry, which you don't remember Mick Dry. YSY, drink Mick Dry. And that killed the brand. People didn't know what dry was. And then the people that used to drink Michelob then got confused with this McDrive, and it ended up killing the entire brand to the point where I don't even know where Michelob is at the moment. Does it still exist? Isn't a myth something that isn't true? In a Webster's definition, it may be not true as in it's not okay, let me say this better. A myth tends to be fiction, not fiction, non-fiction. But if someone were to tell me that Star Wars isn't true, I would have a hard time with that. Star Wars is a myth. It's something that's made up. But the story exists, and it's true to me. I know that doesn't sound great. So, Star Wars is not fact. Like, a fact is non-fiction that we put humans on the moon. Okay, that's fact. That's outer space. Okay, so Star Wars is not that. But the myth of Star Wars is true. You know, not that I really, really want to go there, but, you know, the books that I have up here, and I'm not even going to get them out, when we talk about mythology, we could start talking about religion here. I think I'm going to leave it at that because I can open a whole Pandora's box of worms. I'm Catholic. I teach at a Catholic university. To me, it's true. In today's society, what sociological changes are ripe to be tapped into a myth that could be possibly become iconic? I think there's a trend out there now. The wearable and the digitization is one at the moment. We talked earlier in the semester, we talked about Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. Someone asked me what's Web 3.0. And I actually listened to a podcast yesterday from the Stanford Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders, which finally, it was the first time I heard something that could tell me what's next. You know, I hear stuff that what's next, and I finally heard something that made some sense. And we have an IP address on this device and this device, but we're starting to be able to get IP addresses and everything. We're, you know, our thermostat. Nest makes this incredible thermostat. They're now making smoke detectors. Our refrigerator can talk to an app. You know, we're starting to get more digital devices with IP addresses. And it was the chief technology officer from Cisco that was talking about the next wave is the digitization of devices. They were calling it the Internet of Everything, which I really didn't like that. But she said a couple of times the digitization of devices. That's a really big deal. When things can become smart and not just analog, and they can connect. And by connecting, we get not only viral, but we get a virtuous circle of what we can be able to do with our devices. Controlling the lights and the thermostat and the temperatures and all the devices within our house. That's neat. And Microsoft is a company that's struggling. You know, think of all the trends that Microsoft have missed. They missed search. They first missed the internet. Then they missed search. Then they missed social. Then they missed mobile. And now they could miss devices. How much of an impact has growth on social networking had on companies' efforts in building up a good... How much of an impact has the growth of social networking had an impact on the effort? Well, as I alluded to earlier, particularly with celebrities, and we talk about icons, we now have celebrities and icons that without social media, there's no way in the world that a Paris Hilton would have the power that Paris Hilton has. There's no way that Kim Kardashian would have the power that Kim Kardashian has without social media. There's no way Kate Upton is on the cover of Sports Illustrated unless she already had 1 million followers on Twitter, prior to becoming a Sports Illustrated. Maybe she was worthy of being in Sports Illustrated, but not the cover. They picked her for the cover, because of her social media status. It was not an accident. Because they know that she is a social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter icon. And they could use her to help fuel sales of the magazine. Can iconic brands work against themselves by alienating customers who may not relate to the selected myth? I'm not sure I understand this question, because an iconic brand, the reason why they're iconic is because they have a myth. And if the consumer didn't like the myth, they wouldn't be following the brand in the first place. Could an iconic brand select a different myth than the one that got them there and alienate their fan base? Well, of course they could. That would be incredibly stupid, though. If Harley Davidson were to become an environmental company and go green, well, that myth and that story has nothing to do with what got Harley Davidson to Harley Davidson, and they would probably alienate everyone. Are different brands with a focus on different product dimensions more easily generated into icon brands than others? Is it only that lifestyle brands fall into this category? Well, lifestyle brands fall in this category easier because the lifestyle brands have an easier path to the gateway drug, experience to identity. There's no reason why a corporate brand shouldn't also be highly rich experience that would also go to identity. It just happens more naturally with lifestyle brands. But let's just say Cisco. Cisco could be a company that without Cisco, we don't really have an internet infrastructure backbone. There may be networking people out there. There may be some networking, as in network engineers, that work on the infrastructure of the internet. They could be diehards. That's not my area, but if you have a rich experience that's related directly to the product or service, then guess what? You have fans. If you have fans, you have identity. The article says that icons are born mainly through advertising, but will that change in the rise of social networking channels such as Facebook and Twitter? Absolutely, positively, yes. No ifs, ands, or buts. How can marketers walk a fine line between overconsumption of an iconic brand by the masses, which would then dilute its appeal to the consumption culture, and the expansion of the brand to increase sales and revenue? Well, I have this discussion a lot, particularly with Apple, because Apple is no longer the small fry that it was in the early 2000s. Apple is no longer the underdog poking fun at big Microsoft and big Intel. Apple is the 800-pound gorilla in the room in many of these categories. And I keep saying that Apple has lost its rebel voice. Just because you're the bigger company doesn't mean you can't speak still with a rebel voice. And to the point where I know I have students that they won't look at iPhone because they want to be different. If Apple went to the rebel voice and stayed with the rebel voice, being different would be choosing the iPhone, regardless of market share. That's interesting. The one thing you must get right when building a brand. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to create 2 separate videos because these things keep getting too long. Hold that thought.